of Ace Sporting Goods in Washington, PA, the largest or one of the largest gun shops in southwestern Pennsylvania. Ben, thank you, sir, very much for being with me.
Yeah, very happy to be here.
So let me ask you about gun sales. My understanding is that they've really gone through the roof in recent weeks. Is that your perception as well?
Yeah, it's very true. We've seen a significant increase in firearm purchases, over the last couple of weeks, and more so this past week with everything that's been going on.
Can we get a little more specific? Why do you think that people are buying guns right now? What is it for?
Well, major concern, once after the whole COVID-19 crisis started, you don't know what's going on around you. And now there's been, a lot of talks, unfortunately, about the defunding of the police departments. And I think it really has people concerned, the honest, law-abiding citizen, whomever you are, unfortunately may have to take things into their own hands.
Are most of these gun purchasers new to firearms?
Most definitely. We're seeing a significant increase in first-time firearm owners. A lot of people have talked about it, but finally decided that it's time. So we're seeing that a lot of our customers have, they mentioned the defunding of the police, and they've thought that, maybe it's time that I do come in. They're kind of being reacted to the situation and unfortunately not being proactive.
Let me ask you about the supply. Is there a decent supply of both shotguns and handguns?
Now, the supply is a big challenge right now. For us to procure, specifically home defense shotguns is difficult. If you come into our store, you'll see the main wall where they all sit. It's bare right now. We're also seeing a significant increase in larger home defense handgun, typically a 9mm higher capacity. People are coming in inquiring about them. For us to procure them through our distribution network has been quite challenging.
I was told that there are actually lines out your door. Now, I know you have to observe the social distancing,
Right.
but is that true?
That's true. We're still abiding by the governor's rules of limiting the people that have access to our store. So they are, unfortunately, they are waiting. We're doing our best with some challenges with the background check as well, getting everybody through. Fortunately for us, our inventory is still pretty strong, and we are able to get some firearms at this time, but it's getting more and more difficult as the calendar goes.
Yes, I mean, suppose I came in and wanted to buy a shotgun and you don't have it. You don't have what I want. Can you order it? How long a wait?
We do our best to order that. And a lot of customers ask that exact question, and the answer is I don't know. So I'm on the phone. My father and I, daily talking with our different distributors throughout the country, and we may pick something up, right now, or it may be 6 months. Typically, what we're seeing is the wait time is going to be significantly longer. So we're kind of encouraging our customers, if they see something that interests them, to take advantage of and get it now, because it may not be here tomorrow.
And so I guess if you want to have a firearm, you could be out of luck. It may be, I'm assuming what's happening for you, you talk to other gun shops. Is it the same everywhere in southwestern Pennsylvania?
It is in southwestern Pennsylvania and throughout the entire Commonwealth. And we can see that by talking with other friends who have stores throughout the state and throughout the country. They're seeing the same increase as we have.
So the bottom line is that if you don't have a firearm at home now, and you feel that the police are not going to be properly able to take care of situations in your neighborhood, you're going to have a little bit of a wait to get a firearm.
It could be challenging, and it's becoming more and more. Unfortunately, our manufacturers are reacting as quick as they can, but the fact of getting raw materials and even having the manpower to produce to keep up with demand is a challenge. And unfortunately, we've had the ebbs and flows in our industry with other happenings that have happened, and that's not the way that we like to generate revenue. By civil unrest and general concern for the nation. So that's why we do our best to get what we can and rely on our relationships with the manufacturers and with our distributors to get firearms in. And right now, we're still looking pretty good.
Bottom line is that the protests and the talk of defunding local police really, I mean, whether you like it or not, it's been good for business.
It has been good for business, and just the thought of defunding police is such a concern. We're in communication with them, with what's going on locally. And the fact that I saw on the news where someone in Pittsburgh, I think it was on Fox News, was someone in Pittsburgh locally was designing their own pipe bombs. And they said, well, the first thing we're going to do is contact the police. Well, what happens if the police aren't there anymore, to come defuse the situation? That's a big concern. And I think that's why we're seeing big part of the reason why we're seeing an increase in first-time buyers, where I pick up the phone and I call, someone may not be there, or it may take more time for them to be here. And unfortunately, the person that's intruded your home is not going to wait.
Well, Ben Romanoff at Ace Sporting Goods, thank you, sir, very much for your time today. I very much appreciate you talking to me.
You bet, John. Thank you.
Our special guest today is Adam Garber, who is the Executive Director of Ceasefire PA. Adam, thank you, sir, very much for being with me.
Thanks for having me, John.
So first, tell us what Ceasefire PA is as an organization.
Ceasefire PA is the state's leading gun violence prevention organization. So we work to educate, build partnerships, and advocate for policies that will reduce the epidemic of gun violence that is injuring people and taking people's lives.
Well, as you know, today there has really been a huge escalation in the sale of guns in Pennsylvania and across the nation. In fact, gun shop owners are telling me that first-time buyers, not necessarily collectors, but first-time buyers are coming in over fears over COVID, protests, and now concerns about defunding and abolishing police forces. First of all, have you observed the same trend going on? And what is your reaction to it?
Yeah, so we've definitely both heard those stories, and we've seen the statistics that background checks have skyrocketed for gun purchases. So it's definitely true. First-time buyers and people who already own guns are rushing out to get more during this confusing and, quite frankly, scary time. I would tell you that guns don't make you safer. The statistics show again and again that having a gun in your home often makes it more likely that someone will get injured or killed, whether that's someone coming into your home or domestic violence issues, suicide during depression, and other instances. And so the ideal that you want to get a gun because you're afraid, I totally understand that instinct, but you need to really resist it and think about other ways to stay safe during this time.
Well, let's break that down a little bit because I gather you say there are statistics that show if you have a gun in your home, you're more likely to die from gun violence.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can look at it in a few different ways. So we know during the pandemic that domestic violence calls are already up significantly across the Commonwealth, 25%, including about 20% in southwestern Pennsylvania. When there's a gun in a home and there's domestic violence, it is 5 times more likely that a woman will be shot and that there'll be a homicide. So we know that it can escalate situations like that from violence to death. The second example I think that's important is suicide. People are depressed and confused during this time, whether that's because of economic concerns, financial distress, or just that they're stuck indoors all the time. And when there's a gun present, it means that the suicide is 33 times more likely to succeed. And so those statistics show that guns often lead to more unsafe situations rather than actually ensuring that people are healthy during these times.
Does Ceasefire Pennsylvania take a position on whether or not police forces should be defunded or that some of the military-style weaponry that they have should be taken from them?
So we have not taken a position on those issues yet. We do have concerns that guns make situations often more dangerous, and we have seen, in some cases that happens with law enforcement as well. I think that at the end of the day, the question is, how do people stay safe? And we're really focused on the homicides and the injuries that are happening in communities because guns are flooding our communities, and that question. And how do we reduce that violence? And I will note that we think that things like military-style assault weapons don't belong in civilian hands and really are, we know have caused a lot of the damage in our communities, including in Pittsburgh, obviously.
Yes, but are you saying they ought not to be in police hands as well?
I'm saying, yeah, we have not taken a position yet on that question.
Fair enough. Do you think that the violence that occurred on the margins of some of these protests, do you understand why that might make some people feel, particularly if the police force is defunded and not as active as some might like them to be, why someone might want to go out and buy a firearm?
Well, I think first we have to recognize that the protests are happening because of an awful reality in our society that systemic racism has impacted African American Black communities and caused extreme violence like the death of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor before that. And some of that is directly linked to gun violence in our communities. And so there's a real need to fix that systemic racism. And here's what I'll tell you. Racism causes more violence. Guns cause more violence. Racism plus guns cause even more extreme violence and death. And the vast majority of the protests have been peaceful. We've had huge gatherings of people in Pittsburgh and around the country who've gotten together to say no more to these situations. And I think, the amount of damage and looting is on the small side compared to the extreme impacts of this racism on our society. And so I think we need to focus first on what the protesters are saying, which is that we need to change the way the world is working so this doesn't happen anymore, and that they're doing it in a peaceful way most of the time. I understand where people are coming from in terms of thinking there are some growing concerns about violence or other issues in our society. And this is an unusual time, something like probably none of us have lived through, where we have a pandemic, these massive protests, and a whole set of other issues running together that have, created extreme unrest in our society. But I just come back to my own life. When I think about, I live in Philadelphia, there have been protests. I'm in the middle of the pandemic. I'm in a big city. Will a gun make me safer? Will it make my son safer, my family safer, and my community safer? And public health experts will tell you again and again that the answer to that question is no, it will not make you safer. So you can come up with other solutions on how to stay safe in these times, but taking that step back and evaluating will go a long way. I will say, sorry, go ahead. I want to say one last thing here, which is,
Yeah, please do.
You have to get a gun. I cannot urge you strongly enough, if you make that decision, to go through the appropriate steps to get training before you get it, to set up a safe home storage system, including a lock on your gun, and safe appropriate storage so it's not misused or gets into the wrong people's hands. And if it's lost or stolen, to immediately report it to the police. So if you make the decision to purchase one, please be safe when you do it.
Well, Adam Garber, who is the Executive Director of Ceasefire Pennsylvania, thank you, sir, very much for taking time with me today. I really appreciate the chance to talk to you.
Thank you so much, John. Take care and have a good day.
Hi, I'm John Delano, political editor at KDK TV, and our special guest today is KIMSTOLFER, who is the founder and president of Firearm Owners Against Crime. Kim, nice to be with you again. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, John. Nice to be with you.
So let me ask you if you are hearing what we have heard from the gun dealers across Pennsylvania, the gun shop owners, that there really is been a run on firearms purchases in Pennsylvania. Are you hearing the same thing?
Absolutely. And in addition to that, many of those purchases are by first-time buyers, ones first never having had a firearm. So yes.
Why do you think this is happening right now?
I think it's a deeper realization that they have to be able to defend themselves, and that law enforcement's tied up in certain areas and they can't respond to all incidents. So people want to defend, and they have a right to defend themselves and the parent and their family and their parents, and the Constitution provides for that.
Do you think it has anything to do with the pandemic, the protests, and the calls to defund police?
I think that's all part of it, yes. Calls to defund the police are misguided, maybe one of the top 5 worst ideas I've ever heard in my life. And the pandemic has also thrown the whole country into an uproar. with a lot of, our government's been tied up with so many other facets that they can't respond as normally they would.
Do you think that crime has gone up or will go up as a result of this?
I believe it has, and especially in the urban areas. You look at Chicago, they just had, I think it was 24 murders in a 1 hour period or something like that. You got New York City, Brooklyn, they just had a huge increase in murders. So we got a lot of problems with crime in the major urban areas that are also having the worst problem with riots.
And you said that you thought that the defunding of police was one of the 5 top worst ideas. How does that relate to gun purchasing?
Well, if you don't have enough police presence, if it's well known that police can't respond, then people have to find some way to create a situation where they can defend themselves in their home. That's why I wrote the Castle Doctrine in 2002, to expand the protections for citizens defending themselves. And so when law enforcement can't respond, I always tell people, law enforcement should be called first. They should respond to these incidents, but absent that, you absolutely have a constitutional duty and right to defend yourselves.
From your perspective, why, I mean, is it simply because so many people want to buy guns, first-time buyers, that we have this shortage? Apparently, you can't get firearms in many of the gun shops right now, or at least you can't get I get certain kinds like shotguns. What's going on here?
Well, I think that a lot of people are getting advice from others as to the best types of firearms, and there is a lag time and a supply issue here. It's also a supply issue with ammunition too, because we have this moment where we're home and you have the opportunity to perhaps go out and practice and hone your skills, if you will. But one of the other clandestine issues, if you will, behind the scenes, is that many people are running into this regulatory brick wall of gun laws that most people didn't know about. You know, they've listened to the narrative that's in the different media outlets. They've been told by some politicians, we need more gun laws. But they're finding out from California to New York City that getting a firearm has never been harder in the history of our country. Pennsylvania is the 11th most restrictive state. I think it's time for people to realize that gun laws don't make you safe. They really don't.
I interviewed someone from Ceasefire, Pennsylvania, who basically says that having a gun at home makes you less safe, that particularly with the increase in domestic crime and in mental illnesses and the like, the chances of suicide, having a gun in your home, he argues, makes you less safe. Your response to that?
Poppycock. That's demagoguery on their part. They've never recognized self-defense. His predecessor once told me there was nobody in Pennsylvania ever defending themselves with a firearm, but we have hundreds of examples on our website. The academic science that he's quoting was mercenary science, paid for by anti-gun foundations. They have never contributed that, the peer-reviewed data, that they've never sent that out for examination. So academics have undercut that, and they keep repeating a lie, almost as if it was, you know, some sort of tyrant or dictator expecting the people to believe a lie if they repeat it often enough.
And finally, Mr. Stolfer, then, would you recommend that people go and buy a firearm for their home if they don't have one now?
That's a choice that's a personal choice. Would I recommend that they have that option? Yes. It's a difficult choice because you have to come to a ethical and moral decision. Can you take another human's life? And if not, then I'd recommend pepper spray or less lethal forms of self-defense. But if you feel that you can, in the gravest extreme, if you will, take another human being's life and defend yourself, then a firearm is probably the greatest equalizer out there. I would also recommend, if you're going to do that, get some training. Mandatory training is wrong because government can't fix anything, including potholes. But get some training and learn how the firearm is going to work. And there's lots of access to that sort of options and opportunities all across Pennsylvania.
Well, Kim Stouffer, the president and founder of Firearm Owners Against Crime, thank you, sir, very much for being with me today. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. It's an honor. Thank you.
Just because the weekend starts doesn't mean our commitment to excellence stops. Wake up to KDKA TV News Saturday and